County natives. I'm glad to be back here. We both did stints in other parts of the state, but we're both back here. We're in our home, so we've got a little video here that our agency produced a couple of years ago. I'm sorry.
Okay. Good afternoon, everyone.
Good afternoon.
My name is Raphael Cobb. I'm here at M.E.E.T as the gardener. We are very happy to have everyone present. It's a blessing to see one or two chairs empty, and they will be filling up. So we thank you very much for that, for coming. Thanks very much for the positive response. And we are extra happy to have Mr. Lee with us and Samantha from the USDA. And they will talk to us today about high tunnel, not greenhouse. High tunnel. And he will also explain the difference between a high tunnel and a greenhouse. Now, any questions that you have, please ask them. Any questions? He told me earlier that the questions that not been asked, that's the only foolish question, and that's why he's here, to answer the questions that you may have. And I know they'll be able to meet the need and to answer the question. And what I would like to do, after the presentation, anyone who wants to see the high tunnel, I'll be willing to give them a tour. So I'll be right here after the presentation. I'll give you a tour on the high tunnel. Okay? And anything else? We have again Ms. Samantha and Mr. Lee. And I'm not going to take any more time and turn it right over to them.
I've got one, I think.
Thank you.
Thank y'all. We're glad to be here. So we got a short little video that we'll play. It's a couple minutes long, and then Miss Samantha will go through some PowerPoint here with some basic information on it. But like Mr. Raphael said, any questions you have, just ask them. If we don't know the answers, we'll get an answer and get back to you on it. So.
Yes, and also you don't have to wait till the end to ask a question. He said to interrupt him, put your hands up, and be willing to answer right away.
All right, with that, we'll get started.
The high tunnels is one of the practices that is very popular, especially in the Central Valley, because we have two climates, too cold and too hot. And the high tunnels are perfect for those two environments, especially for farmers who grow specialty crops like leafy vegetable, and they can do in the summertime under the high tunnel without any problem.
High tunnel I get from USDA, and they help me. I grow a lot like tomato, eggplant, bitter melon, long beans, jujube, persimmon, tangerine.
High tunnel gonna save water because of the environment inside. The evaporation is very low, and the moisture in the soil tend to stay in there much longer. So high tunnel is just one of the things that add into the market's value that they be able to satisfy their customer year round.
The winter time I have to plant every day inside the high tunnel. I take to San Francisco every Saturday, and I plant inside the high tunnel to sell it earlier. You sell earlier and you got more money.
One of the feedback that I get from the community, this program is really benefit to the farmers.
High tunnel is more better, so your farming is fun.
Just wanted to show that video, kind of gave an overview of what we do. Do want to throw out there that this requirements and different stipulations is mainly for the state of Tennessee, although I think most states offer the high tunnel. I know that video was based on California, but every state does things just a little bit differently, so do take that in mind if you are from a different state. To start off, I kind of wanted to go through just the basics, and we usually start with, are you eligible? And being eligible kind of starts with the Farm Service Agency. Have you established records with the Farm Service Agency or the FSA? They're housed in the same office as we are. And what you do with them is you go in, you kind of talk to them, and there's a form that you'll fill out that will get you in our system. There's a few things that you'll have to provide them with, and what they will do is they will give you a farm and tract number, which is basically like a parcel to us. It's kind of like a property assessor parcel for a block of land, but it's more commonly known in our office as a farm and tract number. It's not the same, but it's kind of how we keep up with you too. Also, another requirement is, did you meet the income requirements? You have to make below $900,000 in a 3-year period average. So the last 3 years of your income tax needs to be, on average, less than $900,000. So that's, just something else that I know that it's usually a problem for a lot of people, but I wish it was a problem for me. Oh darn! But just throwing that out there, because those are some things that we need to get ironed out very quickly.
Did you say 900,000 over a 3-year period?
Over
The adjusted of 3 years.
Yes.
Average. So 900,000 each year the last 3 years.
So you could make over that 1 year as long as your average per that 3-year period is less than 900,000. So also something else, you need to already be in production of crops. You need to be gardening already. Everything we do is kind of cyclical. What we have in applications from last year is what we're working on now. So this is all kind of a pre-planning thing that you guys need to be getting in order, is the production of crops. And also, it's not an eligibility requirement, but have you been irrigating? It kind of opens up some other doors on some other practices we can help you with.
What do you mean by have you been irrigating? What does that mean?
Have you been watering your crops? Basically, it doesn't.
Or a hose or anything?
Right, a water hose, anything. Just, are you irrigating them on a regular basis?
And that's it's 2 years. 2 of the last 5 years is the wording. Have you irrigated 2 out of 5 years? So to be eligible for irrigation related practices like micro irrigation and things, the way the requirements are now, you're supposed to have irrigated for 2 previous years. Otherwise, we can't help with the irrigation side of it.
Mm-hmm. Like I said, it's not something that makes you eligible or not. It's just something that'll open some other doors to some other practices, like the irrigation practices. So the next step, after you've kind of gone through those questions and answered them, is to sign the application, the EQIP application, which stands for Environmental Quality Incentives Program. You have to sign that application, and that puts you in for ranking. We'll usually contact you after that point and schedule a farm visit. Like I said, the ones that we got applications for last year are the ones that we're funding now, so it's kind of a process. When you call, we may not come out and do a farm visit right away, but signing that application, we will be out there to do a farm visit at some point. And that farm visit is just to see what you've got going on, make sure you're in production of crops, take a before picture. We always like to take before pictures, things of that nature, just to kind of inventory resources.
When's the time period for that?
It varies. We have different programs that come up throughout the year, and we try to, like today would have been a beautiful day to have picked, to have gone out to do something like that. So there's
March or April?
Just to be done
you.
for the mic before you speak. The recording.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
So he asked, at what point do we make those farm visits? It just depends. It depends on throughout the year. We can make them tomorrow, or we can make them December. We don't start ranking those applications until February, March of every year. So as long as we make that farm visit before that time period, it could be at any point in time in the year. If I know that doesn't give you a specific time frame, but it's just kind of as people come in up until March. So.
Ms. Samantha, can you just comment a little bit about you should be cropping before you come?
Right.
Just expound on that, please.
And that's
What
something.
size of garden you have to have, or whatever going on.
That's something I've got in a later slide. The importance of your square footage in your garden. Well, I'll go ahead and say it. You need to be considering what size high tunnel you want, and that needs to be the footprint of your garden. We're only eligible to pay for the footprint that you're gardening in the high tunnel. If
That's the way. If you and the maximum size traditionally has been 3,000 square foot. So if you had a 700 square foot garden, we wouldn't be able to do a 3,000 square foot high tunnel over it. It would just be, if you had a 10,000 square foot garden, then we could do the 3,000 square foot,
Right.
but we can't exceed what you've already got there.
Right.
And one thing
needs
I
to
believe
match.
on the earlier question about the time frame, traditionally the general equip that these fall under has been the federal fiscal year starts October 1. So the month of October is generally a very good time to sign up. This past year it was November 19th was the first round cutoff. So if you sign up by November 19th, you're inside that first batch is the term they use. Anything after November 19th goes into the sign up 2, which a lot of years Tennessee doesn't get to a second round of applications that year. It'll roll over into the following fiscal year. If we had a large lump sum of money that come down, from Washington or something like that, we could potentially get to another round. Like right now, there's some additional money that's coming out of the Inflation Reduction Act that the sign-ups actually, we just got an email that's going to be continued to April 21st, I believe. But that doesn't include high tunnels. That's for climate smart practices like cover crop and cropland conversion and things like that that are going to be eligible under it. So I don't believe high tunnel is going to be eligible under it. But traditionally, if you sign up in October, is for EQIP or any of our other programs on our side of the office is a good month to get the ball rolling. At least by that time. Sorry to interrupt you.
You're fine. I needed it. Just be considering for this, year how big you want your garden to be, and try to make those match up, or go bigger than what you're planning on doing, because that's always good too. Something else to consider is whether or not you can install that high tunnel yourself. If you can get a good group of friends, watch a YouTube video and put it up in a day, great. But if that's not an option, consider buying from a supplier that can put it up, or having in mind somebody that you can call to hire to put it up.
Miss, question, please. What about if you put it up yourself?
You're more than welcome to.
You can do that?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
There is plenty of YouTube videos out there that are great, that put you step by step, but it's a long process, and if you don't have about 4 or 5 good buddies to help you with it, it could take a little while.
So if you put it up yourself, whether you put it up yourself or you pay a company to put it up, after it's erected, then you come and inspect?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
So something else I'd like to get in mind about that is, if you do put it up yourself, make sure you meet our practice specifications. So a caveat is it isn't a guarantee that you'll get funded. I know this year in the state of Tennessee we had about $4.8 million in requested funds, applications if you will, for high tunnels. And of that money, we only got $900,000 to spend within that specific fund pool. Wow. So that's roughly about 18% of the money that was allotted that was actually paid for and what was asked. So something else to think about. There are other fund pools out there that can fund high tunnels, but that's our main high tunnel funding pool. It's the main practice in that funding pool. So it isn't always a guarantee, which is something else I'd like to remind people of, is don't pay for anything if you are wanting funds from us. If you're going to go ahead and do a high tunnel and you're not worried about funding, do it. It's your land. But if you're dependent and want funding from us, make sure that we're plugged into that process, and don't get started on anything. Don't do anything. Don't buy anything until we have come out and been a part of that planning process. I think we've got a question. The minimum size garden that will qualify, that's dependent upon the kit that you choose. There is not a particular minimum, but it does need to be a manufactured kit. It can't be something that, you go to Lowe's and get you some PVC and some painter's plastic and throw it up in a day. It needs to be a manufactured kit. So there is no minimum size. It just needs to meet our practice standards and specifications. It is a cost share program, and I say that it is a cost share in which we share in the costs. There's two different payment rates. There is the regular rate and there is the historically underserved rate. They're not meant to be a paid in full type of payment. It is a payment based on a rate. So what I mean by that is this year, the regular rate for high tunnels was $4 per square foot. So you do 700 square feet, it is $4 times 700, which is your amount that you will get reimbursed. And that means you go through the process with us, you sign the application, you get a contract, and you know that you have a contract. We give you the practice specifications. You purchase the high tunnel, you install the high tunnel. We come out, check it, and then we'll reimburse you that 700 square feet. As long as your garden size, met that 700 square feet. If you only had a 25 square foot garden, we can only pay you the 25 square foot. So just kind of a rundown on that process. The high tunnel, I know I've said this a couple times already, it has to meet our specifications. And all that will be made clear when we sign the contract.
I'll add one thing on that too. There is a different payment rate for a small high tunnel. I've not seen what specifies small, but it does obviously pays more per square foot than the $4. So that's it. We've got to talk to the state. I think it says state agronomist approval or something like that to see. But if you was only wanting a 240 foot one versus 3,000 square foot, I would say something like that would be considered small. So we could check on that and see, where that breaking line is for where it would pay more per square foot on that.
And I don't know if you wanted to talk about advance payments or not, but
yeah, I will mention that so that, like Samantha said, the historically underserved rate is 90%. That's socially disadvantaged, beginning farmers, limited resource, which is if total household income's under, I believe, $27,300 a year. There's different categories under this historically underserved category. But if you're eligible for that 90% rate, then you're also eligible for advance payment, which means we can pay you 50% of it after you sign the contract and you decide what kits you want in size and everything, because we have to be very specific we can't change anything after we've paid you. But we can give you 50% of that money up front to purchase the kit with or do whatever. But that money, if we make the advance payment, it has to be spent in 90 days. So basically, we would pay you 50% of the money, and then you would have to buy your kit or something and show us that you spent it. And then you don't have to have it installed and finished in 90 days, but you do have to have that money spent. That way, if you can't can't front the whole cost of it. At least that helps you on the front end.
Who are the historically underserved?
It is, I believe, some.
It is limited resource, which that goes back to that adjusted gross income.
The question I asked was, who are the historically underserved?
So the historically underserved are the limited resource farmers, the beginning farmers, the socially disadvantaged, and the veteran farmer or rancher. So the limited resource has a household income of less than $27,750. And a gross farm income of $221,000, which usually most people, qualify for that part. It is the adjusted gross income of $27,750 that people usually get stumped by. The beginning farmer or rancher is a person that has not been farming for more than 10 years. The socially disadvantaged is an individual or entity who is a member of a socially disadvantaged group, and those groups consist of American Indians or Alaskan Natives, Asians, African Americans, Native Hawaiians, or Pacific Islanders, and Hispanics. And the veteran farmer or rancher is a producer that has served in the Army, Navy, Marine, Air Force, or Coast Guard, and has not operated a farm or ranch for no more than 10 years, or first obtained status as a veteran in the most recent 10-year period. So anybody that has been discharged for more than 10 years, or that it isn't already considered a beginning farmer. So if you're a beginning farmer and a veteran, that 10 years doesn't really matter. But if you're just a veteran farmer that has been farming for more than 10 years, and you have been discharged for more than 10 years, you don't qualify for the rate. So I know that's kind of a lot. So
What is the difference between a farmer and a just plain old gardener?
you're producing crops.
If it's just for yourself, you're considered a farmer?
You're still in production.
And the way we, as an agency, check that for the ag side, so crop or vegetables, is if you've been filing a Schedule F on your taxes. So the way to verify is if you can provide a 1040 where it does not, what's the word I'm looking for? Don't have a Schedule F attached to it, which I believe is item 18 on a 1040. So if you've been filing a Schedule F, that's showing farm income. That's the only way that we check that for ag purposes is, and you don't have to provide that on the front end, but it can be audited, for lack of a better term, and be checked within the life of the contract, or even shortly after, to prove that you actually was a beginning farmer. We could come back later and request that from you.
Yep. Yep. Any other questions?
Yeah, quick question. Many people have asked me this question, and I would like you all to answer it very honestly. And that is, if the government will assist you, you're eligible and everything, and the government will assist you with 90%, and you pay 10%, the question comes up every time, what is the catch behind that?
It is taxable income. I think that is the only catch that I can think of.
Right.
So
You will get a 1099 on the money, where you will have to pay taxes on that. But as far as
Pay taxes on what?
on the money you receive,
On the money you receive.
right? So if we give you, $12,000 for your high tunnel, and once it's checked out and it's good, and we give you that money, then at the end of that year you're going to get a 1099, showing that as income. However that works between, I'm not not an accountant, but you are. It's like you're getting any kind of farm income.
That's the only catch you know about?
Yes, I mean that as far as I know, that's the only deal. You know, you're supposed to use it as intended for the life of the practice, which is 5 years for a high tunnel. You know, not supposed to. But I'm not going to say anything as far as if we're going to come back and look at it or not. But it's a 5-year practice where you're not supposed to have hydroponics, and Samantha's going into that, or hanging baskets or tables or things like that in there. It's, as USDA, are pushing for sustainability and a lot of push for food deserts. If you're in rural areas, if you're not within 10 miles of a grocery store, which is not real common around here, but in urban areas, if you're not within a half a mile of a grocery store, it's considered a food desert. So there's kind of a push to get high tunnels and different sustainable, food practices in those areas.
Is there at any time the government might force you to plant food for their own purposes or for the service, or
There's
any
no
pressure on you for that?
As far as I know,
They
there's
grow food for them?
not. As far as I know, there's not anything in the contract. There's nothing that says what you can and can't do with the food. There's stipulations, I believe, about hemp production,
Yeah.
Hemp? You mean marijuana?
especially marijuana. But
You must have
you
a
can't
license.
if you're growing hemp, you have to be licensed
Yes.
for it. And you can't grow illegal drugs in it.
Yeah.
But as far as
All of it.
what you do, if you give the food away, you sell the food, anything like that, there's no stipulations. If you eat every tomato you raise yourself, that's fine with us.
So basically, you're saying that the government wants you to. So basically, it's a 5-year, they want you to invest at least 5 years of your time into the.
Yes, that's the intent, is that anything we assist on with cost share assistance through EQIP or any of our programs, that's cost share for conservation practices. It's supposed to last you're supposed to maintain it for the life of the practice. Now, if you get sick and can't physically grow anything, as long as you don't sell it or go out there and tear it down or things like that. If we come, for say we do come back in 3 years and it's not got a crop in it, as long as it's there and things like that, we're not going to come after you. It's just you can't put the thing up and then us come back next year and you done sold it to a neighbor. That type deal. Life happens. If and ideally, if you sell the property, whoever buys it assumes is going to use it, things like that. But also, that doesn't always happen. The contracts, I don't think there's a slide in there about it, but EQIP contract, generally you have to do something within the first year. If you got a contract, say April 1, by April 1 of next year, you would have to have implemented something. Either, in most cases, the high tunnel is the first thing you do, even if you've got gutters or micro irrigation or something with it. So you'd have to do that and us pay on it. Or if you're not going to get it done, if life happened and you're for whatever reason you're not going to be able to get it done, you can request a waiver that says I'm not going to have it done in the first 12 months, and then that gives you additional time. Also, during the contract, usually we try to spread it out over a couple years if there's additional practices in there. But after the last practice is paid, the contract is technically over. We may come back and check it, for reasons like our boss is checking us, and come back and look at it to make sure everything was good and that we didn't make improper payment or things like that. But generally, once it's paid and we come out there and look at it, we're most likely not going to come back out there unless you have additional problems or something like that.
Yeah, the reason why I was asking is that we were planning on getting 3. Now, we wanted to get 1 for basically personal consumption and then 2 other ones to sell like specialty crops like tomatoes, in the community and so forth. Do they allow you to do things like that under this program?
Yes, you can sell them for, or you can use, as the lady on the video, was talking about, for selling produce out of, or products, cut flowers or whatever. The requirements, Samantha can tell you the maximum that we can do under a contract. It's a dollar figure. And the wording in there is as many as is needed to meet the participants' needs. So if you have, 2 acres of truck crop that you're selling and a personal garden, I don't see anything that would say we could not do, 2 out here for your truck patch and then 1, there at your house for personal consumption. It just ties back into this limit of the most we can have for as far as high tunnels in a contract is.
I want to say our maximum was $28,000 on regular payment rate and $34,000, whatever that adds up to per square foot.
Okay. So on the 28 or the $34,000, so on the 28 or $34,000, you could look towards spending, participating in a situation like that. It would be close to 20% out, then the USDA would basically fund 80%, 75-80%.
In theory, it would be 90 and 10.
Oh, 90
It would
and 10.
be, and that comes from a regional cost.
Okay.
They evaluate cost on a multi-state, and I can't even tell you what states it is that we're in with, but they average these costs and say, well, the average high tunnel, if we're paying $4 at 75%, well, then we were saying that, a total high tunnel is going to average $5.33 a square foot.
Okay.
So that's how, because Tennessee and a few other states are together on that payment scenario. Now, if it costs you $2 a square foot or $20 a square foot, you get that same amount. That, that's irrelevant to the. So, like Mr. Cobb said, if you put it up yourself, you're probably going to come out better. Versus if you hire somebody from California to come install it for you, you're probably going to be out of pocket a lot. This is a set rate, no matter what it costs you. If you do the work, hire it all done, and you know that on the front end when you sign the contract, it'll say, X square feet at X dollars a square foot, and that's what you're going to get paid. Either way.
So if you go bigger, you're not going to get paid for that.
Right.
If you say 90 square feet and you do it 125.
Right. If you do, yeah, and like if we contract a 3,000 square foot one, basically a 30 by 100, and you want to go 30 by 125, that's fine. We're just going to pay you on the initial 3,000 that we signed the contract on.
Yes.
Regarding having the high tunnel on your property, you're saying you're in a 5-year contract with you, that it has to remain with the property?
It's not a 5-year, the contract life isn't 5 years. The high tunnel is supposed to last for 5 years. I believe the plastic is rated for 4 years.
4 years.
It's kind of guaranteed for 4 years, but the high tunnel has a 5-year lifespan. So I've not encountered the situation where if you move and want to take it with you, I'm not sure how that would. I can't give you an answer on that. If it would, if you're allowed to move it to a different garden spot, or if it needs to stay where we initially contracted it at. Under traditional practices like a livestock watering facility or something like that, it would stay there with the land. But I'm not sure on a high tunnel.
Yep. We've got another question that is, what is the penalty for breaking the contract?
What? Generally, if you break it all depends on if you've been paid, how much you've been paid, and what happens to what we've already paid you on. That's a very loaded question. That's very scenario dependent. Generally speaking, we can come after, if you've installed this high tunnel, we've paid you on it, but say you hadn't done your gutters yet. Well, then you just abandon it, tear it down, whatever. So we've paid you on this high tunnel, you hadn't finished your contract. then we're gonna, and you won't do anything to try to fix it with us. We're gonna come after what we've paid you, and then up to 10% for liquidated damages, for our troubles as the agency. We hope to not run into that. You know, we try to avoid that scenario because it don't work out good for anybody typically.
At what point does someone who participates in this program legally own the high tunnel?
You legally own it when you buy it. We're going to reimburse you, you know, that cost share rate or pay you the cost share rate when it meets our standards and specifications. You know, that it's got, you know, the manufacturer kit's good, it's installed as it's supposed to be. Your wood boards are in the bottom, and you know it's ready to go. If it don't meet and you don't agree to it, you still own the high tunnel. We're just not going to pay you back for it at that point. Right? We can't repossess it. So you would own it.
Quick question. Do you suggest that we should insure the high tunnel?
I personally haven't had any dealings with insuring one, but that would be a very good idea, especially with the winds we've been having, you know, lately. I would say that, and I don't know what it would cost, or you know how. I would say, you know, if it would fall under a typical homeowner policy, you know, like if your lawnmower shed gets blown away. Yeah. Sometimes it depends on your policy, but yeah, I would say it definitely would be because, you know, like everything else, the cost of high tunnels has went up tremendously since 2019. So I would say that'd be a good idea to make sure it's covered one way or the other.
Yeah. Thank you.
All right. Just some general criteria. Lee's kind of alluded to some of this stuff, but it must be grown in that natural soil profile. We do allow raised beds to be installed, but it needs to be no taller than 12 inches. Basically, no tables, no hydroponics. It's not a greenhouse, it's a hoop house. That all ties back into that because we want to be growing within that natural soil profile.
Samantha, will you just say a few more words on raised bed? Can you define a raised bed, please?
That is just where you have heightened the soil profile. You have gone in there and you've added amendments and mulching and even some basic dirt from Lowe's, or soil, I should say soil. Some soil from Lowe's, mulching, anything like that. Anything to create a higher bed. Some people can come in there and add the wood frame around it. That's acceptable.
What about blocks?
Blocks is good too.
What about mounding? Is this mounding count?
Mounding counts. It's
Mounding?
mounding counts.
I believe that was that in the video. It showed,
Yes.
maybe a picture we have in here, but it shows some that's kind of mounded up.
Mounded.
The one thing that my way of thinking about the raised beds and natural soil profile is if the root of the plant can go into the existing soil there, it's good as long as they ain't over 12 inches tall.
Right.
But if you put a pot in there or a trough or anything like that where the root can't get into the natural soil, that's what we're not. Then that's one of the differences mainly of in our world, the differences between a greenhouse and a high tunnel is using the natural soil profile versus hanging baskets, tables, aquaponics, hydroponics.
So, Mr. Lee, can we just make a box like this, waist height, and put soil in it and plant?
Not waist high. That refers back to the 12 inches. And this is during, you know, in 10 years down the road, you know, after 5 years, it's really, it's met its lifespan as far as we're concerned, and you can do whatever you want to.
The problem we have is our whole area where we're gonna have the vegetables and stuff is solid rock.
That's where you would definitely have to do some raised beds and
But
get,
we can't do that though, you said.
or the raised beds you can. That way, you know, a foot high. And if it's solid rock, I would probably try to excavate out, you know, some of the rock. But for sure, if you can get enough, you know, 12 inches isn't, or 12 inches isn't much, but you can at least get some very, you know, adequate soil in there with organic matter and everything, and hopefully have a, you know, better look out of it.
Where to get that?
I'm going to talk to you about it after. We'll talk about that.
So basically you're saying these rules only apply for the 5 years.
Right, because after, I mean, it's meeting after 5 years.
You can do
It's-
whatever you want to do with it.
Technically, I'm probably not supposed, you know, to say that, but and y'all are broadcasting it worldwide. But
Okay, say for instance, in this situation, you get the high tunnel, and the requirements that you're saying is actually for 5 years or until you pay back.
if you did pay back, now if there was a contract violation and you had to pay the money back, then you know, then we're not right. We're not tied to it anymore.
This applies for the 5 year.
Yes, even if your contract, you know, if you get a contract today and you want to hustle and get it up tomorrow, and everything, when we're paid and done, what the contract is.
There's no say so that anybody says anything. What you do with that high tunnel?
Right. I mean, well, you know, we're supposed to for the 5 years you're supposed to maintain it and do what we say.
Yeah. And if we come back out there, that's something that we will consider on another application
Right.
for sure.
It could be if
So that,
even if
keep
we
that
don't
in
come after
mind.
you financially, if we come out there and, you know, 4 years and the high tunnel's gone, I don't know that there's any, you know, contractually, we may or may not come after you,
No,
but
I'm
it could
saying
hurt
that,
you.
say for instance, you got the high tunnel, and during the 5 years, you cannot put beddings or plants.
Tables and hanging baskets and things, right.
That was only for the 5 years.
Yes, I mean, because that's the lifespan of the practice, and you know, I hope it lasts a lot longer than 5 years.
So the high tunnels, well, I'm sorry.
Is this 12-inch rule hard and fast to where if you get an inch or two higher than that, I mean, say for instance, you got blocks. The blocks are 8 inches. You put 2 blocks,
And
but then you're not even.
So you're
built up to the
16
top.
inches, right?
Yeah, but you're not building the dirt up to the 16. You're lower than that.
That would be. I hate to answer for the agency, you know, in other counties and other states and everything. I'm personally not going to come measure. You know, if I walk in and it looks 12 inches, if I walk in and it's this high, yeah, then we're
Yeah,
going
we're going to have problems.
we're going to
It's not
say
good.
something.
All right.
But as far as
Yeah.
you know,
Exactly.
that right, and that's what, you know, ideally it's, you know, 12 inches or lower, and it's and Samantha's kind of touched on earlier. A lot of our stuff changes, you know, year by year, and especially farm bill by farm bill. And who knows in the future what the rules will be. We do, and I hate to get ahead and take, you know, away from her stuff, but a lot of stuff's coming down the line with urban agriculture and things, and more small tunnels and like, well, what do they call the little
Low tunnels?
Low tunnels, like over just a row, caterpillar tunnels and things like that. Where with all this is kind of the push for urban ag and sustainability and things. So a lot of that stuff's coming. And you know, the high tunnel stuff has changed. It's not been around. I'd say the first one went in Carroll County in probably 10 years ago, 12 or 13, somewhere in there. And we've done several since then, but it's still kind of relatively new compared to our, you know, what we've been doing for 50 years.
So, so you're basically saying that the 5 years is what the product will last,
That's the yes, sir.
the life expectancy.
Yes.
The plastic in the standard, it says the plastic should last.
A 4 year
years.
minimum.
4
So
years.
that's where, you know, ideally, I know there's several around that have lasted longer than
Okay.
that before the plastic gave way. And if you take care of stuff, you know, it's
Yeah,
hopefully going to last well past 4 years. But that's the standard.
The
right?
standard, okay.
So if the plastic goes to pieces, you've got to replace it. If the plastic falls apart, it's not on. If the plastic falls apart, you got to replace it. So
Yes,
that's
ma'am.
that's a
And-
cost that you need
Right.
count in there.
Right, and that's what, if a storm hit it, and that's Mr. Cobb talking about the insurance. If a storm hit it 3 weeks after we paid on it, that's really on the participant and the land, owner to fix that. If it's paid and done on our part, it's really on you for as part of the maintenance, operation and maintenance of it.
So if we had an erected tunnel, high tunnel, and you came out within those 5 years and saw that a tornado had come by and it wasn't replaced,
Right.
the plastic wasn't replaced, would you say give our money back?
No, after the contract's expired, we're not going to come after the money. It
No, I
could,
mean in that 5-year period.
right, but the contract's technically, it's going to be over, not long after we pay you. But the lifespan of the practice is 5 years, so you're supposed to, maintain it and fix it, all that for 5 years. We're not going to come after money, 4 years down the road. But it could impact you on additional
On a
equity.
future application.
If there's a question there that says, are you maintaining what we've paid you on before?
Do you have any idea the wind strength that these will withstand?
I don't. They've got a rating.
That's something you need to probably talk about with your installer, whoever you choose to buy it from. I do know you can choose to go with a tighter bow spacing that can kind of help for wind and also snow loads, which we haven't had to, really worry about here. But it's something to consider, that bow spacing. But also, I have heard a lesser bow spacing kind of gives it some flexibility in some high tunnels, so you got to kind of find your balance, and you really need to talk to your supplier about that.
What is the comparison between the high tunnel and the greenhouse? Because I was, we were thinking about greenhouse versus high tunnel.
They consider the same.
Well, traditionally, a greenhouse is more for hanging baskets, tables, things like that. Concrete. Some greenhouses have concrete floors. Now you can heat a high tunnel.
Okay.
Or traditionally that wasn't. A high tunnel didn't have any heating or cooling.
Oh, you can. Okay.
You can heat. Heat them. That's really the main differences, to my knowledge. Is the method of growing stuff in it. It's the biggest thing. As far as I know.
Basically, it's the same concept, the same.
Same concept, right?
Okay.
A lot of the times greenhouses are probably more, polycarbonate or something more so than the 6 mil plastic.
So basically, this program was designed to get people involved in growing straight from the soil.
Yes.
Oh.
Yeah, that's what we're into that. That's really high tunnels. They all have sides that raise up. I'm not sure about greenhouses if they all. I assume they have a side, but the high tunnel you won't be able to, when it gets hot, let the air flow through it.
Roll up sides.
Roll up sides, and also you may look into shade. Have to have shade cloth to keep it cooled off also.
Okay.
But that's what we don't as NRCS we don't have anything to do with greenhouses. We don't have a practice standard for it or anything like that. So I can't answer that really any deeper.
No, I just
than
wanted
that.
to know, what was.
Mike.
Oh, I just wanted to know the pros and cons between the greenhouse. So basically, a high tunnel is the same structure as a greenhouse. It's just that you can't have baskets and tables in there with. You can't have half of it in growing and a half a basket or.
Right.
You can't have no baskets in there.
Right. It's just got bigger. It's just like you garden and just put a top over it. That's the way I think.
Another question. There are people that have high tunnels that have a track where their foundation, and they can take that high
And
tunnel
slide it.
and slide it into a different plot. Do you cover that type of structure?
It would. I've not personally dealt with any of them. Have you?
I think, well, I know of some people that have. As far as that goes, it helps with salt accumulation because you're moving that plastic off of that footprint and allowing natural rainwater to seep through and and get rid of some of that salt accumulation. But I do think we can do it.
It can do. I know. I hate to speak for other states, but our previous soil con, she's in Alaska now, and she's in brief conversation. She talked about them moving theirs up there, you know, because their growing seasons are considerably different from ours and things. So it would be. I would say it would be possible. You're not taking it off of that tract of land. You know, if you're moving it from this plot over to this plot and then either on down or back to that one, whatever, as long as it's there, I personally, I wouldn't see a problem with it.
Yeah.
I don't know of anything in the practice standard that says it can't, you know, move around out there.
It does need to be extremely flat to get those tracks to operate properly. We did get a question. The $5 per square foot does not include the heaters and fans, etc., just the frame and plastic. And at this time, that's correct. There's no cost share available for heaters and fans. Right. That's just considering the plastic and the installation of the high tunnel.
And that too, that is the single wall plastic, not, you know, a lot of them are double wall plastic. Right. So to meet our minimum is the single wall plastic, which is, you know, obviously cheaper than the double wall. Yes, ma'am.
And the double wall is at the top.
Yes, it would. Yeah, and I'm not.
Upper part, not the lower part.
Right. It's the top that bubble that creates a bubble in there.
If you got a kit that had an integrated track system, would that qualify then?
Yeah, as far as I know, there's nothing that says we can't do that. So I just assume that it would be, you know, a very costly additive, just like the heaters and fans and big, you know, if you put a massive door on each end, that's generally driving the cost up too. And that's another thing I think, you know, she's going to touch on, like door sizing and things. You can go very elaborate, you know, and still be fine with us. It's just all those add-ons are going to run the price way up. You know, traditionally.
One other question on when you talk about the natural soil profile, if you're planting at the natural level of the ground, does that mean you can't amend that soil?
No, you can amend. Okay. You can amend that soil. Yeah. You can do, and you can till it. You know, no, as far as how you plant it in there, as long as it's within 12 inches of the natural soil profile.
And it doesn't matter whether you use row beds or raised beds.
Right.
As long as they're not over 12 inches.
Right.
So,
Can I ask one other thing? Now, this concept, because see, this was a novel concept of the high tunnels. I know about greenhouses. That's why I'm just asking. So the whole concept of high tunnels grew out of what? What was the reason?
I think it all goes back to sustainability and urban agriculture. It seems to me that we try to kind of find our niches in our groups within the agency to where we can kind of touch a little bit of everything. It's all incentive, voluntary. We just kind of try to help boost and promote our natural resources, and in this case, it's the soil profile and also the human aspect of preventing those food deserts.
And the biggest thing with them is extending the growing season. You know, getting time on the front end. And you ain't supposed to help you be able to grow stuff all winter, even though I believe y'all have. But getting extra days on the front end in the spring and later in the fall to extend it out and produce more food on that same amount of.
And also,
area.
in the high tunnel, the tractors can go in there and make the row beds for you as long as you want.
Yes.
Tractors can go in and prepare the beds and so on. Whereas a traditional greenhouse, that might not be possible.
Right.
Yeah.
So something else I wanted to touch on is it doesn't need to be used for storing tractors or livestock. You know, if we come out there and you're tilling it or pulling the disc through there with a tractor, we're not going to say, oh, you're storing your tractor or anything like that. Or, you know, if you've got some shovels backed up in the corner, we're not going to comment on that. But it needs to be for the purpose of growing plants. As much square footage as you can get in there, as many beds as you can get in there. That is what its sole purpose is, at least for those 5 years. Right. So.
Now, what about when you're starting your plants, is that, I mean, they're in the soil in the little cups.
Right. You're not going to have a big footprint there. You're going to have, they're small. So,
I mean, but do you allow that?
yes.
Okay.
Nursery in the high tunnel.
Oh.
Yes. That's what it basically.
You're talking about kind of plugs in the bed.
Well, like when you're starting,
Startup plants, yeah.
right, when you have your starter plugs, is it okay, because you said no tables.
Right.
Is it okay to have a little nursery in there where you're starting your plants before you plant them in your 12-inch raised
But-
bed?
I've
Might
not.
check on that
Yeah,
one.
it don't specify that you can't, as far as any of that. That's something we could check on and see what, and that might be something that needs to be addressed, to say either yes or no as far as starting, because it's not, the wording for any of that is, isn't in there to allow it, or it just, right. So that'd be
That's a
something
good question.
we need to check on.
Something that, it may be kind of like, why wouldn't I consider that? But locate the structure near a viable water source for irrigation purposes. Don't just put a high tunnel up on a piece of land you bought, 6 months ago that doesn't even have a well or city water connection. Consider your irrigation and how you're going to manage that, and incorporate that in the placement of the high tunnel. Also, kind of going back to the tracks too, consider a level grade with a naturally occurring slope that does not exceed 5%. When you get into having over 5%, you have to start considering leveling and things like that. And, if anybody comes in and just does that, they're not going to consider putting the topsoil back over that. So it needs to be a good spot, a good level spot, or the square footage needs to be shrunk to fit the area that is flat. So just something to consider too. Some things that we have to have is it has to be a manufactured kit. I think I've already touched on that.
Yeah.
And it needs to be installed according to the manufacturer's recommendations. And it has to be constructed of metal, wood, durable plastic, and it has to be at least 6 feet high in the peak of the structure. Now there's different, standards and specs for the low tunnels and different things like that, but for the high tunnels specifically, it has to be at least 6 feet in the center.
6 feet what?
6 feet tall in the peak. Now it can come down, less than 6 feet, but in the center it has to be a minimum of 6 feet. So, and there's a lot of different high tunnels out there with the high sides to where you're not having to bend over as much. So, just as long as we're getting that 6 feet in the center. Also, and I think I've got a picture of this, y'all were alluding to the tractors and the high tunnels. Something else to think about, if you're going to be driving a tractor through there, make sure you have a door big enough for the tractor to go through there. If you're using tillers and things like that, just make sure your door is big enough to run the tiller through. So always consider the equipment going in and out of the high tunnels. So just something else to think about when you're installing it. The thickness needs to be a 4-year minimum lifespan with a minimum of 6 mil greenhouse grade UV resistant material. And that goes back to, we want it to last for 5 years. So it must be 6 mil UV resistant plastic. It has to be. So main takeaways, 6 feet in the center and 6 mil UV resistant plastic. Has to be. Any question?
Difficulty here growing fruit trees. Does this program apply if you want a high tunnel and grow fruit trees inside, like a 19-foot high tunnel?
The lady in the video did.
Yeah, she had trees. I've not seen anyone that planted one big enough for trees. I would
Maybe dwarfs.
that, or that when you get like that, it's going to be a very big wind load or wind catching,
Yes.
sides and things. I think it would be something else that we would need to check on because we've not ran into it, personally. And it'd be good if I had these questions all beforehand, because we would've got some answers, but.
I mean,
that-
ours is 16 feet right now. It would
Right.
be going up another
3 feet, right. You know, I think it would be fine as long as the manufacturer backed it up saying, you know, that it's good, not gonna, you know, reduce the integrity of it too much.
What I did is I built a garden house of wood, just like you would build a home. And I put the greenhouse on the south side, and it's 17 feet tall. The highest part goes down to 11 feet. And I put polycarbonate, and I grow all kinds of tropical stuff in there. And because the house has a concrete floor, it never freezes.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, if it went down to 0 and stayed there for 2 weeks, it would freeze.
Right.
You know.
But it's
So-
drawing the heat out of the
But
house.
we're eating loquats out of it right now. We've eaten kumquats out of it and all kinds of stuff, you know. It works well.
The only extra thing to consider there is your shade and your sun having, you want to get the most out of the sunshine coming from the east to the west. So placing that high tunnel in an area where it's getting full sunlight the whole time period and not under the shade of the house or the shade of the trees, something else to think about when you're planning for it. So. I just wanted to kind of close out with some pictures that we've had of some that we've installed. This video here, they're just framing it out. This is a Gothic style high tunnel. And this is after they've almost completed the frame. And they've got the plastic with the roll-up doors. And hopefully their door's big enough for their tractor to go through if it needs to. In a classic style installation. I really like how they've got everything kind of laid out, ready to go. You know, it's kind of like they've got the puzzle together, they've just got to put it together. So. And here they are installing the top part of it. Any question?
No. The high tunnel is set up, it's installed. I know you're getting ready to plant. Do you have to mulch the ground before you plant?
You mean like you have
Wood
to?
chips, leaves, hay, straw, put a layer of organic material on the ground?
You can. You don't necessarily have to. You can plant directly into it. Of course, the mulch of any kind is going to help with moisture and weed prevention because it's going to have a good cover there to prevent unwanted stuff to come up, especially if you've gotten the plant already up and coming and you can kind of, put that mulch around it to prevent the weeds. Does that answer your question?
You can. You don't have to.
Mm-hmm.
And we can. That's an additional component that we can cost share on. You don't pay a lot, but it does pay a little bit for mulching inside the high tunnel.
So before we plant, we till the ground and we decide to put wood chips in the entire area. You will do a cost share with that?
Yes, on natural, there's different scenarios, but like with full natural material, wheat straw or wood chips would be, as long as it's breaking down in there. And I would say I'm not a plant specialist, but some of those you may want to watch, what they let off when they break down as far as changing the soil chemistry.
Okay. All right.
So what is your thought on the greenhouse plastic? I mean, the mulching. Would you frown on that in between the raised beds?
As far as I've not had any much experience with it. Samantha
Since
probably
it's
does
not
more.
natural?
It's not natural,
But it keeps down your
it
weeds.
keeps your weeds down. Something I would be cognizant of is the breakdown, making sure that those plastics are not breaking down and going into the soil. Landscape fabric, anything like that could be a good alternative. Some plastics may be perfectly fine, but just kind going in there and, you know, landscape timbers and different, you know, if you're using, heaven forbid, you know, a light pole or something that's been heavily treated,
Right.
consider those effects within the soil seeping into that.
Or railroad ties.
Right.
Yes, that's what I was looking for, railroad ties.
With the creosote.
And that creosote soaking back in. But if it's rated for that and quoted for that, you know, we have no problems with that. I mean, you might have more moisture than you know, planned for, but, so.
Okay, question, how is the high tunnel secured to the ground?
They're pinned down, aren't they, Lee?
Yeah, they drive the post in that the post that the hoops sit on, or drove
And their
into the
space, how
ground.
far apart than the posts?
Typically 6 feet, I believe, is the standard.
It may
they
be
vary depending on
the kit.
size and manufacturer.
Yeah.
Usually about 6 feet.
Yeah.
Question.
Is it okay to put compost in to plant the plants in?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would say it's probably encouraged. But kind of going back to what Lee said, consider your carbon to nitrogen breakdown and your pH as that stuff breaks down. You don't want to tie up anything that you might need later. So
They don't mind if you put something around the exterior. There's no problem with putting something around the exterior to keep the animals from getting in once you start growing things or something like that.
Yes. We have placed a metal sheet around the high tunnel, the entire area of the high tunnel. So we dug 18 inches into the ground and put a metal sheet all around it. And then cover it
To
back.
keep them from
To keep all
digging,
fold
boring
and
in.
mold and
Oh, yeah.
groundhogs and everything else.
I've seen people drape like plastic. It almost looked like a honeycomb around the high tunnel just to keep their chickens out of it. So that's a good thing to consider.
Keep what? Chicken?
Their chickens. They had.
Dig on going?
They can.
When you roll the sides up.
Oh yeah.
And then everything's try to go.
Yeah. So. Yeah. But this slide, I know I've touched on it a couple times, but just making sure your tractor fits if you want your tractor to fit. And just another good example of where the plastic is over the top. Something else to consider is your drainage. I think the recommendation is 10 to 20 feet spacing between multiple high tunnels just for snow and you know, rain accumulation. Because you're putting that plastic over the top. That's an impenetrable barrier that's going to be impacting those sides there. So just make sure that you have the proper drainage and you're spacing those right. And this one's a good example of one of those that has the raised doors. You can kind of see how it's got that crank that will raise those doors up. So. And back to the mulching. I tried to find some really good pictures of mulching. Here's just the natural material straw mulch in between the beds just to prevent weeds and also to, you know, increase the moisture content there. Also, another thing that we could potentially cost share on is cover crops, but consider your growing season. You know, cover crops is something really good that we can add in there and promote soil health. It also decreases, you know, unwanted weeds, but, you know, it's not doing you any good if you can't crop that year too. So also be cognizant of at what time you might want to do a cover crop and make sure that it doesn't coincide with your vegetable or cut flower time period.
Mr. Samantha, can you just explain what is cover crop? What does it mean? Cover crop, what's that?
Cover crops is a selected species. Clover. Clover's a great one. It provides nitrogen back into the soil. A lot of times we'll put in like a brassica of some sort just to kind of help. They've got a very good root system that can penetrate the soil and kind of break it apart to kind of provide more air in the soil. All of these, all of the cover crop species that we use, we have different mixes in our office that kind of help promote soil microbes and worms and different things like that. And it helps to promote the aggregate stability. It provides cover, which kind of decreases erosion, which is not always an issue in high tunnels, but it's, you know, it provides cover. So, question?
Yes. Is the word you're saying cost share?
Yes,
Is that
ma'am.
what you're saying?
Cost
Could
share.
you explain, because you mentioned that you cost share on mulch and cover crops. What is that?
It's the same thing that will help you to, the same thing that pays for the high tunnel. It is a cost share through the E.Q.I.P. program, which is the Environmental Quality Incentives program. All of that will be placed into your application. So the high tunnel will be one practice within that application, and then if you choose to add the cover crops or the mulching, we can add that into your application package, if you will.
Or the irrigation?
Or the irrigation.
So basically you're saying, so basically, and that covers that 5-year period? So basically I can come back, mulch, get...
It is just a 1-year
But it could be
practice.
if you had it all in there. If you had the high tunnel and cover crop and mulching and you had been irrigating, so you did gutters and micro irrigation and all that, we could spread it out over 2 or 3 years to get it all, to give you plenty of time to get it all done.
Okay, gotcha.
It's kind of dependent on how big your contract is as far as number of practices and things.
Okay.
But we can spread it out a little more. That's what the cover crop pays. I was looking to see it's like $391 an acre on
There's a
on the
small
1 acre
scale.
or less, and there's
Yeah.
a small scale that's pays by 1,000 square feet. That'd be about $125, I think, on a 3,000 square foot, somewhere right in that neighborhood. But it would pay you once, and that's for I believe that'd be for a 5 species cover crop. So traditionally on row crop ground, all the time we run like cereal rye, wheat, crimson clover, a turnip and a radish, or Austrian winter peas and crimson is two legumes, and then 1 brassica. Things. And a lot of it's tied to what everybody's goal is. If you're trying to build nitrogen, or you're trying to raise your carbon ratio, things like that. There's different mixes, to adjust that. But and like Samantha said, it's hard in a high tunnel. You're trying to extend your growing season, not shorten it with because the cover crop's going to take at least 90. It's got to be on the ground at least 90 days. So, if you have a fall crop in there, and then you can't put your cover crop on, or really your cover crop would need to be going in when your fall crop's still in the ground. So it's kind of with high tunnels, it's a little bit of a tight window, typically, but it is doable. The mulch is a little more the question right there.
How about if you did half? You do half of the space and cover crop?
Yeah, you could do that and do 1/2 and then flip it. That would be doable, especially on a large high tunnel where you wouldn't. If it was going to be, your first year and you didn't want to use the whole, one end for, and like we wouldn't, turnip greens and collards and things like that we wouldn't, if it was for production, we wouldn't pay on it. But that's a very good cover crop that's fall seeded typically and grows all winter. So that would be an option, where you could actually get benefit out of it, of eating it or selling it, and then also you're getting the benefits of it growing all winter in there.
Do you all help people with soil testing and helping to know what to do for amendments?
We don't. UT Extension does. They have a form in a box that you put your soil in. Not to say that we wouldn't, if you brought a soil test in tomorrow, we wouldn't attempt to go through it with you and kind of explain what's going on there and what the results are. But no, we don't do any soil testing, and we don't go out there and actually do the samples for you. But UT Extension, yes, sir.
And I hate to speak for them on if they'll come sample for you, But in our office, we do try to keep the boxes and the forms. It's $15 for a basic test. They have additional boxes you can check that, you know, if you want to check more than just that's for the nitrogen, potassium, phosphorus, and then the micros now. Used to it was $7, and then when they went to 15, they checked some more, you know, more things. But there's other options too on there. But they send it. Their lab is in Nashville, and usually a couple of weeks they get it back to you, the results. And if you put your email, they'll send it real quick, and then send the paper copy
Did you
too.
say NPK plus micro?
It's got the micro. Well, in the nitrogen they don't really check, but they'll give you the recommendation because it's so volatile. You know, it varies. But if you can list, I think 5 different crops on there that you want to test for. So they'll say, you know, if you're growing grass hay, it may be this, or if you're growing vegetables, it's this. And it'll give you the N, P, and K recommendations, and the micro, give you the micro readout too. On like sulfur and I think some of that stuff. I ain't sure what all was on that.
Any other questions?
So you're not saying microbes, you're saying
Micronutrients, yes ma'am.
Micronutrients.
Micronutrients. That's not that's outside the outside the N, P, and K.
Here's a example of a raised bed. He's not quite cropping everything yet. We'd like to see him crop a little bit more, you know, more of that footprint. But it's an example of him, or he or she growing tomatoes on a raised bed. Want to put emphasis on the no tables and the no hydroponics. This is a zoomed out version of the high tunnel with the sides that are rolled up and the tomatoes.
Can you go back one more slide, please?
Go back.
Yeah, this one. Okay, thanks.
Welcome. And this is an example of people growing within those. Another example. He's got his greens pretty well, and he's only got walking space in between to harvest those greens. And then that one, he's gotten started. He just hasn't completed his beds yet. Just a good example of a classic one, and also a Gothic style.
And that one there, it does look like it's got the plastic, right?
That's the black plastic.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Weed cover.
Yep. Any other questions?
A quick comment. So I think we have learned that the question comes to me all the time, how much does a high tunnel cost? It depends on the size.
In the supplier.
And what you put in it.
And the supplier.
What you put in it.
Yeah.
What's the average cost?
We don't know.
That's a very loaded question.
It is, and it also depends on if you're going to put it up yourself too. You know, you may pay somebody a little bit extra to put it up, or that supplier a little bit more. And also it varies on how far you're willing to go outside of your locality to get one. You know, if you're getting somebody out of Kentucky, they've got to drive down here and put it up. If you find somebody within the state, hopefully it's a little bit cheaper, and you know, it's a lot more local. So to give you a price is, I can't do that. So
Can you give us a range? Can you give us a range, like 500 to 1,000 or what? I have no idea what it would be.
This year, people have come out. Most people I've dealt with have come out pretty close. They haven't been out just a whole lot. That's kind of dependent upon who you choose. In years prior, they've had to pay, 500 to 1,000, maybe even 3,000. out of pocket. But, you know, I can share with you these cost rates for this year, and, you know, that's why price checking is such an important and big deal to us. Making sure that you're checking with these people and doing that price checking. I know in some cases it changes between now and a year from now because costs of everything changes so quickly, but our costs will change too. Every fiscal year we get a new payment rate based on, you know, what things are costing that year. But really utilizing that $4 per square foot and also that $4.80 a square foot for the historically underserved rate. Just kind of price checking and getting a ballpark because, you know, what you're out now should be about close to what you will be out in the next few years. We hope.
And two,
it changes.
There's a lot of variable on a basic kit that's just, you know, one layer of plastic, very basic, versus double layer plastic, vents, fans, all that.
Roll-up sign.
Right.
The doors.
If you get the nice roll-ups versus the, you know, real manuals, things like that. So there's a very big difference in you know, from
Yes.
basically what will meet to the Cadillac of high tunnels.
Yes.
You know, it's hard
For sure.
to say what, because it's. I'd hate to even try to be within $1,000 right now what one would 30 by 96 would cost.
Something that might be helpful is you have the high tunnels through this program, right?
Yes.
And you're going to have a tour
Yes.
after this. Approximately how much was it out of pocket for what we're going to go see?
I cannot tell you that because we went oversized to begin with. We went beyond the 30 by 90. We went to 125 feet.
Yeah. Instead of 30 by 100, they did 125.
We did 125 feet.
So if
But-
it had been 90 feet as the application
It
was
was, that was
approved,
the,
what did you pay? Or what did you pay, I guess? What would the 90% be for the USDA?
It would be difficult to make apples to apples, but because we added so much. There was we did landscaping on this. We put in heaters. We roll up the sides. We put in fans. We put in water, irrigation.
None of those are covered anyway.
Yeah, all of these, in this particular one.
The reason I'm asking
That's
is
in
if we knew what the 90% was, we could know what the 10% was for a 90-foot.
right, and you could, basically now, you could call right now and say, and get a quote on a basic, you know, either 30 by 72 or 30 by 90. Typically, there's size breaks that are cheaper per square foot. So generally 72 foot's a good length, and then 96. Going from 96 to 100 a lot of times costs you a lot more for that 4 more foot because it's an additional sheet of plastic and things. So it may be more, you know, save you tremendously to not do that extra 4 feet. So
I can give you what it costs just for the basic install this building that you're going to go see. You probably figure close to $30,000
And that's for the full size.
for the 125 by 48.
Well, that's huge.
yeah, that's huge. So
Yes. And we have 2 of them.
So I'm wondering if it would be possible to go over what you would expect during the application process again, when you were saying that October 1st through the middle of November is the best time to apply. What would you expect after that? I know you went over it real quick. but-
Basically, you know, October 1st is about the best time to apply. It seems shorter because as soon as you apply, things start rolling. You can apply at any time of the year. You can go ahead and submit an application now if you wanted to, just, you know, throwing that out there. But there is a ranking deadline of November. It's usually November 18th.
application deadline.
Sorry, not a ranking deadline, not there yet, but an application deadline, which means you have to get that application to our office prior to that November deadline. And it changes every year. It's usually about the 18th. After that point, we really try to start rocking and rolling with our farm visits. So we're coming out, we're checking things, we're looking at the garden, we're taking our before pictures, and inventorying the resources and seeing what practices you want to put in your application. After that point, they start releasing what we call the ranking pools, which is kind of like our fund pools. So we go in, and based on the practices you put in those applications, it spits out what we call a ranking score. And that is what they use to fund from highest to lowest. And I know that's kind of confusing. Those are, hate to say what they're based on because sometimes I don't know, but they like to consider our soil types, the practices we're putting in there, the resource concerns we're putting in there. A lot of environmental questions are involved in that ranking process. And then you get a score based on what you're addressing, and that's based on those practices. So after that point, we have a ranking deadline about March. Usually, this year it was March 3rd. Sometimes it's a little bit different. And usually within a week of that time period, we know about who's funded. And we start sending letters and emailing and calling people to let them know that they were selected for high tunnel funding. Do you want to proceed? So once we get that okay and know that you want to proceed, then we start drawing up a contract. Once we get that filled out and approved and those funds are obligated to you, that doesn't mean that the funds will go in your bank account, but they are obligated to you in our systems. You sign the contract, you're given all of the specifications on what we expect from you so that you can be paid in the end. All that will be given up front and explained, and then after that point, you're free to purchase the high tunnel. Hopefully purchasing it within a year, because we have to have a practice installed within a year, and usually that is the high tunnel. You can't put gutters in without the high tunnel. So we have to have that practice in within a year. They're usually about 2-year contracts.
They burnt through 3 mics.
So they're usually 2-year contracts. We try to consider your timing and making things work. We plan all of those practices accordingly. Once you get a practice installed, call us, let us know. We come out, inspect it, measure it, make sure it meets our specifications, and then we sign some more paperwork and submit that for funding. It should be deposited within their account.
Generally 3 to 5 days after, as long as there's not, at the 1st of October, our system goes down for a week or 2, but generally once we've checked it, measure it, it's all good. We have to certify it in the computer, and then the participant has to sign, to accept the payment, and then 3 to 5 business days, generally it's, direct deposited to your account.
And there is a little bit of paperwork between the November application deadline and the ranking deadline. There's some eligibility paperwork that ties back into that.
A lot of this goes into getting it all fixed on the front end with Farm Service Agency, getting your farm track number established, sign an AGI, which is adjusted gross income. It's a 941 form, which you have to do every year. So if you sign up this year and they get funded, you have to sign another next year saying you still haven't made 900,000, over average for 3 years. And then there's another 1026 form, which is basically you're self-certifying that you're not clearing any wetlands or highly erodible land for row cropping. That's just another. Once you sign that with Farm Service Agency, you're good. But you can be doing all that when you initiate if you don't already have farm records, when you initiate your records with them. With them, we kind of Sam kind of touched on that, but basically name, address, phone number, some way to prove that you own it, either like Tennessee property data or a copy of the deed, saying I own this. And if you don't have a farm and tract number already, from years ago, they give it a new one, or if it's combined with someone else's where it's been split over the years, they would do a reconstitution, give it a new farming tract number. And then with us, besides the application, we also need a voided check for the direct deposit information and a form 1199 for that direct deposit to generate a vendor code. You can also, if you don't have a checking account, you can do a hardship waiver. I say hardship, I think it's what it's called, but to get a physical check mailed to you versus a direct deposit. But the government prefers direct deposit, but we can do the waiver. But that's also part of the eligibility on our side, not Farm Service Agency side. We got to have that set up. But that's what, once all that's done, like Sam said, we'll come out, look at it, and then assess it. Again, on what she was talking about, a lot of the ranking score comes out of things that we can't see in there, based off of the location, the vulnerability of the soils. It may be something, how close it is to certain, impaired water bodies or things like that the computer's calculating, and we don't know how it's doing that. But we do physically answer questions about the aggregate stability in the soil and the erosion and the plant productivity and health, if it's really good or fair or poor, things like that also does play into that ranking score, along with whatever practices. So like the high tunnel may be doing real good for plant productivity and health, but it's really not addressing livestock needs or anything like that. So our programs are size neutral, but a lot of the times the more things you're doing, the better it scores, because you're hitting more resource concerns. You may be doing, if you're doing some, if you have a gully over here beside it, when you shape that up as part of the contract with critical area planning and mulching on that area to stabilize it, that's also addressing a gully resource concern that's going to benefit the application. Even though we're size neutral, it's kind of, the more problems you have or things you need, the better it scores all the time.
Question.
I guess you kind of hit on some of what I was going to ask. One was about erosion. If you're putting up a high tunnel, if you're putting up a high tunnel and you have an erosion problem in that area, how is that addressed when you come out to actually look at it? When you come out and look at it, that's one question. The other question is, can you go further into irrigation? How do you handle irrigation when it comes to high tunnels, if that's included in your application? Is it a drip irrigation? Is it an aerial irrigation? How is that handled? And how do you make that decision? Mm-hmm. Is it by crop or is it by convenience?
So the first one with the gully part of it, ideally we're going to know it initially when we come out and look at it to make sure there's a garden spot there and what everything looks like. If the gully's there, we're for sure going to want to address that in this. Or if it's going to have to be cut down to make it level enough for that, hopefully we catch that on the front end and say, well, we're going to need to seed down this area, shape it up, seed it, mulch it to keep it from eroding. So that would be paid as a separate item in the contract or application, then contract, on the erosion part. The second part, the irrigation, to qualify, 2 out of 2 years of irrigation history, which is you're self-certifying that you've been irrigating either water hose, buckets, whatever. You ain't had to have a irrigation system up, but that you've been irrigating. Then all I've personally done, have you done any sprinklers or overheads? We would need to check in the overhead. I think we can do it, but what we've done is drip tape. And the engineers we have to get them to design it, saying that we have enough pressure and volume, based on row spacing and square footage in total. We can do it through either well water, city water, or gutters with catchment tanks, like Mr. Cobb and them are putting their tanks in. But we would just need to make sure that the tank, give it a design to make sure the tanks are big enough. Then you're catching the gutter water, and storing it, and then with a small pump, like 12-volt pump, forcing it back down the drip tape. I hate, I would have to get back to you on the overhead irrigation, because all we've done with irrigation so far is the tape, drip tape.
Okay, I'm asking about irrigation because on welled property, you can't always put your pool house or your high tunnel in the area where the well is. So as far as expanding your piping is concerned, is that considered part of the irrigation?
It would be, yes, and it's a separate component if you qualify the irrigation in general, and you need to run it from your house side up here down to your garden spot where you've been, running water hose previously, or on top of the ground. It's a separate component in their irrigation pipeline that would pay you so much per square foot to run, PVC or PEX pipe underground down to the high tunnel.
Okay, last question for me. If you are not in the equip program, we're running high tunnels and hoop houses, and you want to just do a particular portion of the equip program without the high tunnels, is that possible, or do you have to go through the whole process?
You could, if you just wanted micro irrigation,
right?
Or yes, you could sign up for just that. If you've already got the high tunnels and you've been irrigating and whatever, you could do the additional practices without just the high tunnel. And again, there's different fund pools that it would fall under. Some things I believe that just those components would still be eligible, at least in Tennessee, under the high tunnel fund pool. But then also, the local county pool. It's the local working group. Each county in Tennessee has one where we get X dollars to spend in that. Those practices would be eligible under it. Also, an associate disadvantage, I believe they would be. I'd have to check on beginning farmer because I don't believe high tunnels have been available under beginning farmer. But I do know high tunnel, county, and then associate disadvantage they are under. So, and that kind of changes year to year a little bit too.
So when you have the high tunnel, say you get the high tunnel installed, do you come out and provide advice on planting in the high tunnels? Or is that the extension office?
That would be more extension office as far as we send a lot of folks to them as far as plant selection, the nutrients, soil testing, things like that. It's more their forte than ours. We're more on the technical, structural side of things, as far as, in the same way with soil erosion and like a lot of stuff we send them to, they send us folks to. They handle the Tennessee Ag Enhancement Program, which is like a lot of it's livestock based. They may have some things too for vegetable croppers. I'm really not positive, but they handle that side of animal production, I guess, where we're more of like watering facilities and fencing and things too.
That was my next question. So that's where you overlap at. The EQUIP program is a really large program.
Yes, ma'am.
And so you actually provide funding for fencing and livestock protection, whereas they actually fund or help with the livestock raising and purchase.
And they have things like working facilities and things under the Ag Enhancement Program, or hay barns some years, or hay equipment and things. But where our livestock side, I hate to get off on a whole nother spiel, but which is we're a little more familiar with that than high tunnels, as far as it's one of our kind of bread and butters. But with livestock, it has to be either tied to prescribed grazing, which is rotating them around, or exclusion, fencing them out of sensitive areas like wetlands and creeks and things like that. So if we're doing those type things, we can do fence, watering facilities, even feed pads sometimes, as long as we're meeting minimum criteria. But everything's tied to the rotational grazing, which is kind of our we do a lot of in Carroll and Benton County, more so than the further west you go, the less livestock there is. So as far as in West Tennessee, but
I do think Tate does have like a producer diversification tab that does have some things in it for vegetable producers and things like that. It's not just livestock, and I think there's some row crop things in there, and also some stuff for vegetable
Is there
production.
a question there?
Yes, there's a question.
Can you read it, please?
We've got a question. Different ways to ventilate, and how hot is too hot for a high tunnel? What is a good temperature? I would say that's crop dependent. You know, tomatoes like it hot. You know, your cool seasons are not going to like it hot. So that's kind of a loaded question. Something, you know, to consider is those roll-up doors to help control your temperature within your high tunnel. But that's very crop dependent on what's too hot for a high tunnel.
And Samantha, this program is a federal program. It's across the country, in every state, every county.
And each state does handle things a little bit differently. They have different flexibilities and priorities. You know, each state gets so much money, and some things are prioritized by Washington on how it's spent in the states. But most of the money, the states can decide how it's spent. You know, if they want to spend more on high tunnels and less on cover crop, or more on livestock than what the minimum required is, things like that. Each state's different, and time frames are generally different as far as when they're ranking. You know, the sign up generally October's good, but some states get a head start on us of ranking and rolling out contracts, and some states I'm sure are behind us too. And the dollar figures, I've not, Tennessee got 30-ish million last year for EQIP in total. Well, some states get, you know, more than that. Some states get a lot less than that. So it kind of depends on the size of the state and the interest in, you know, in program participation.
So you people want to help the small people. When you're talking this EQUIP program and fencing and cattle, you're getting away from this high tower, high tunnel, whatever you want to call it. But this is very new in these counties around Tennessee, isn't it?
We've been around for a long time.
Well, it's been around a long time. Has the high tunnels been around in your county a long time?
They've been, the first one in Carroll probably went in, I'm trying to think, around 2013 or 14, right in there,
So,
that we helped with.
There's a few around in these different counties.
Right. There's,
So
it's been a.
Do you really interested in helping these small people that want to get a high tower?
Yes.
High tunnel,
I mean, that's what,
greenhouse,
and we're, you know.
That's why you're here today.
Yes, and yes.
Because you're talking a lot of paperwork.
Right.
And
it
time
is.
limits.
Yes,
And
for a very small footprint.
It's a small, right, but that's a lot of our initiative as an agency is to get to the small producers
Yeah, you're
and
mixing up
things like that.
Yes.
And all the extension service. These people don't really need that unless they're getting soil samples
Right.
or some other product that they
Right.
need advice on.
And I don't know.
So you haven't really stuck to what these people like myself here are interested in.
It was
The
just
price, the high tunnel,
right.
the size. You stated 30 by 100. Isn't there a 20 by 20 or
That would be back to one of the
back to
original
the kids?
one of the original questions on how small can you go.
Yes.
I'd have to check into that and see what the
So you don't have no
smallest.
information on where these people can go and directly contact somebody to buy a kit?
Yes, we do have that in the handouts.
Yes.
There's
Okay, well,
some
that's-
vendors.
That's great.
Yes.
We're ready to get all that kind of material.
All right.
Thank you, sir.
And we're not endorsing any of these that are in the folder. They're just some places to start, kind of looking. Some of them have websites, and some of them don't have websites. You can still call them. And this list is not all inclusive. There's several places that sell high tunnels. You know, in the planning process, just make sure y'all are kind of letting us know what you're thinking, the kit you're planning on going with, and making sure it meets our specs. But there's only like 3 in these folders, and there's a whole lot more. So.
So when people like myself are out here trying to purchase a high tunnel, do you have any advice on who's reputable in the area?
We can't
You haven't
recommend
studied
or we can't recommend or deter from anyone.
Well, I'm not looking for recommendations.
Right.
I was looking for what the size that tubing was on that construction.
That's
you
what.
Got that in there?
Yes, I think it will, and I know if you talk to them, it's kind of a standard diameter.
2-inch, whatever.
Right.
Okay.
On that, and that way, when you do talk to 3 different vendors, you're comparing apples to apples, and not,
You cover the double sheeting or?
That's where I was back to where I was saying that.
Yeah.
Well, if you meet our basic standard,
right?
Single wall plastic, all this. If you exceed that. If you exceed that, it's great, but you're not going to get any additional money for that part.
Sir. I understand. Thank you very much.
I believe it's not really a question, but they said a 30 by 96 is around $20,000 in Virginia for a high-end high tunnel and $5,000 for installation. So I would say that's probably close to here as far as $20,000 for a nice one, and then the installation that seems a little high for here. I think there was one recently put in that size that was around some over $3,000 for the installation.
You're not sponsoring any heaters or cooling or.
Right, that's all on you. If you put a wood stove in it or fancy vent fans that.
How about that
thermostat?
How about that graveling that went down the side for the?
That's separate. I mean, that's on their own too.
In the tower?
I don't believe that's not included in the cost of the high tunnel.
Right.
We would have to check if there was a circumstance that needed, subsurface drainage, things like that. It could be a separate component potentially, but that's not the high tunnel square footage is just the high, the hoops, the plastic, and then the ends. However fancy you get on your roll-ups and your, all that part's totally up to you.
Roll-ups are pretty standard.
Yes, the roll-up sides are pretty standard. Now, if you get the high, the real easy one to crank, or if you get one that's pretty aggravating, it's going to be a price difference, obviously.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, another question. I've applied for this program before and decided not to do it because there was, this was pre-COVID, when it was a 3-year time frame, and now it's a 5-year time frame. They emailed me the details, the specifics, not just the application of the 5-year contract, of the information. Is that still available? Is there still a site where you can get the details of the program and what you're obligated to during that 5-year period?
That would be, as far as what you're obligated to, is kind of in the appendix of the contract. That would be on. It would be on the website.
Right, but when you apply, you don't get that information, because I know initially when we applied, we didn't.
Right.
And we had to ask for it.
Right. That's what, in years past, we given them an appendix when they signed up. We try to ask them if they would like it. A lot of folks don't, because they've either signed up before, or they're just going to throw it in the dash of their truck. But that is, generally, it would be attached with an application. I think it's 13 pages now for the appendix.
Yeah.
That would be, I'll get your email and try to find it and send you one, the current one. Because it has changed some, since before COVID.
Right.
That would be, but we can definitely, get that. Too, there's a little fact sheet in those folders about EQIP. I don't know if it references that or not about the appendix, but it's a little.
Unless it's produced after COVID, before it didn't. So
Yeah, this thing's kind of. It does have the the website down there, but that sometimes the information's lacking a little bit on our website.
Because we're in a different county, and
Right.
it was the person in our county that actually alerted us that you might want to read all of the documentation since you're signing.
Right.
You might want to
Well,
read
that's what
everything.
I would definitely recommend that.
Right.
Even though, and you about some of that is pretty in-depth lawyer terms, but definitely read through and the whole contract and plan and things to that way you're fully aware of what you're signing your name to.
All right, thank you.
All right, thank you. Everybody else good?
Yeah.
All right, thank y'all.
Thank you.
If y'all didn't get a folder or need any more information, Mr. Cobb's got our number and everything, but our office in Carroll County is on High Street, across from kind of across from the county complex there. There's a USDA sign out front, so. And if y'all ain't from Carroll County, we can put you in contact with whoever. Thank you so much. Sure. There you go. You going to the garden?
Yes, we're going to
I've got to go if it's okay. My son.